I'm joined now by Congressman Daniel Goldman. Thanks so much for joining me again.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be with you.
So we are in the immediate aftermath of Donald Trump taking office. On day one, he wasted no time in offering full pardons to everybody who was convicted and sentenced in the events of January 6th. What does it say that this was his first act in office, despite having run a campaign predicated on lowering prices for his supporters?
Look, it's no surprise, and there were many of us who warned about the fact that Donald Trump was on a revenge and retribution campaign, and that's what his presidency would be. And this is a horrific and absolutely unbelievable decision of his to pardon over 1,000 people who were arrested, convicted, either by jury trial or by guilty plea, sentenced for committing crimes on January 6th when they tried to interfere with a joint session of Congress and overturn the 2020 election. But it's more than that, Brian, because first of all, there were about approximately 170 law enforcement officers who were assaulted, many with very serious injuries. Some who ultimately took their own lives because of the trauma of that day. And the idea that Donald Trump on his first day would choose insurrectionist rioters and far-right extremists over our brave men and women in law enforcement says everything that you need to know about who Donald Trump really is. But the bigger issue in many respects, that's big enough, is that he has now let out of jail the head of the Proud Boys, the leader of the Oath Keepers, numerous domestic violent extremist groups who masterminded and executed the riot on January 6th, who are now emboldened even more because Donald Trump is their savior. He got them out of jail, and he is now the president. So they are A, even more attached to him, and B, already violent in nature, they are even more eager to exact revenge on whomever they disagree with. It's a scary moment in the United States, and I think it is very reflective of who Donald Trump is and what we're going to see, unfortunately.
J.D. Vance was asked about the prospect of pardoning violent January 6th criminals. Here's what he had to say.
January 6th pardons, President Trump says there's a process. Where is the line drawn on who will and wouldn't be considered for a pardon?
I think it's very simple. Look, if you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law. And there are a lot of people, we think, in the wake of January the 6th who were prosecuted unfairly. We need to rectify that.
So he said, if you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. I think that J.D. Vance was trying to take some centrist position, even though pardoning anybody who was convicted or sentenced in January 6th should obviously have to serve out the prison sentence that they were dealt, or any of the sentences that they were dealt. But he was then undermined by Donald Trump, who just opted to offer a blanket pardon to everybody. And so what does this say about the influence of J.D. Vance, and more broadly about the prospect of there being any moderating force to Donald Trump's worst impulses?
Well, even what the senators have been saying today, and there have been a number of them Republican senators who have understandably disagreed with the decision to pardon criminals who have assaulted police officers. Donald Trump is not going to run for anything again. So he is not thinking about his next election. J.D. Vance is. Tom Tillis from North Carolina is going to have a very tight race this cycle. There are a number of others who are going to have to face the electorate again. And the traditional Republican mantra of back the blue has now just been thrown out. I do not want to hear any Republican tell me that party backs the blue when their leader, who has captured and co-opted the entire party, just pardoned hundreds of people who assaulted police officers. Don't tell me that you back the blue, because what you did is back the coup. And that is what happened on January 6th. And so they are going to have to answer for that. And it's not good enough to just say, I wouldn't have done it. Or as John Thune said, I'm looking forward, not backwards, as if every decision, everything Trump says, you get to ignore because he had said it already. It makes no sense. And
Right.
that's not going to fly.
Is there any worry that these people, I know that you had alluded to the prospect of them feeling emboldened, but now will view their release from prison as kind of their mission to then continue to do the exact thing that got them thrown into prison in the first place, now that they feel validated in having done it?
Look, I think this is very serious. And I will tell, I think it's very serious for our political system. And this is why the concerns that I and others raised about our democracy are so relevant. And I'll tell you why. These are convicted violent criminals who have been convicted for being violent within the political process. They are now out of jail, emboldened, and ready to fight for Donald Trump. I have a lot of colleagues who are concerned for their own safety or the safety of their families. And what that will do potentially is have a chilling effect and have an impact on the job that they would ordinarily otherwise do, because they are scared that there will be retribution and revenge or violence against them and their families. And if you have elected officials who are influenced in doing their job because of their concerns for their own personal safety, that fundamentally degrades our democracy. And Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing, because he makes threats all the time. He told the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. And when he needed them on January 6th, they were right there for him.
Yeah.
He is not ignorant. He is very knowledgeable and understanding of exactly what these people will do. And the threat of violence has a way of cowing not only Democrats, but Republicans as well. And that's why, in particular, this is so dangerous. Now, I prosecuted mobsters, and I'm used to dealing with the potential threat of retribution. But many of my colleagues did not sign up for this, and they should not have to deal with it. But that is what Donald Trump's pardons have thrown onto all of our elected officials.
Well, kind of proving out your thesis, I want to put a tweet up here on the screen from the QAnon shaman, as people are calling him. I just got the news from my lawyer. I got a pardon, baby. Thank you, President Trump. Now I am going to buy some motherfucking guns. So doesn't that kind of prove out exactly the point that you were making, that these people are not going to feel some sense of remorse or contrition for what they've done, that it's quite the opposite, that expressly, inherently, they're going to feel emboldened to be even more violent because, again, they've been validated by Trump by virtue of their release from prison at his hands?
In many ways, Brian, this is perhaps the most authoritarian action, separate from January 6th, that our country has really ever seen. Because what this is the President of the United States is freeing and encouraging violent criminals who try to overthrow our government. And he is endorsing them, and he is now ready to use them, as the QAnon shaman says, to buy guns and threaten others.
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot of people who don't want to think about Donald Trump's revenge and retribution and attacks on his democracy, and they want to focus on the kitchen table issues, and they want to focus on the border. And let me tell you, I would like to do that too. I would like to work with Donald Trump to help the middle class, to make childcare more affordable, to make healthcare more affordable, to make rent more affordable, to make groceries more affordable. We are ready, willing, and eager to work with Donald Trump and the Republicans to lower costs for Americans. And that's what Americans voted for him based on. And I think he sold them a bill of goods, but that's what they voted. They did not vote for him to pardon the January 6th violent criminals, to undermine and degrade our rule of law and our democracy. And so we cannot just say, oh, let's just focus on the issues related to the middle class and the border, and let's just focus on policy, when Donald Trump is already on day one attacking our rule of law and trying to undermine our democracy. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly. And that's what he is doing.
Doesn't this have whispers of what we'd already seen from Trump in his first term, where he ran in 2016 based on this idea that he's gonna usher in a jobs boom, that he's going to usher in a manufacturing renaissance, that he's going to pass an infrastructure law, that he's going to pass a healthcare plan that's more comprehensive and more affordable than the one that we had already in place, and that he's going to pass a middle-class tax cut. And at the end of the day, despite all of these populist promises, he did none of those things. And all he did with his political capital was to pass a tax cut where it overwhelmingly benefited millionaires and billionaires. And now he's doing the exact same thing, where he ran expressly on this idea that he's going to lower the cost of housing, of rent, of grocery prices, of eggs. And yet when push comes to shove, when it's time to actually offer up some action to back up his words, he didn't lift a finger to do anything that would relate to lowering the cost of groceries, but he signed sweeping executive orders making sure that convicted criminals were able to roam the streets again.
That's exactly right. And when you look at the slew of executive orders, the flurry that he signed yesterday, none of them are related to costs of living. Yeah. None of them relate to helping middle-class Americans seek the American dream. They all related to Donald Trump's own, either his revenge and retribution, or his support for the Great Replacement theory and white nationalism, or trying to help Big Pharma, as an example, by undoing President Biden's efforts to lower prescription drug prices. And we haven't even gotten to his number one priority, which is cutting taxes for the billionaires who were sitting next to him on stage yesterday at the inauguration. And what I urge everyone to do that listens is do not pay attention to what he says. Pay attention to what he does. In his inauguration speech, he did not mention tax cuts for billionaires, but that is what they are working on right now. He talked about the middle class, and he talked about Black and Hispanic voters who supported him, and that he's not going to forget that. Well, let's see if that's actually the case. I am quite certain it will not be.
Well, I think that's the perfect point to leave off right here. So, Congressman, thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks, Brian.